Sarah Martinez walked into Precinct 47 with her shoulders squared. At 24, she looked younger than the veteran officers, but her uniform was crisp, her resolve ironclad. She had imagined this moment for months, but the wall of skeptical stares was a physical force. The laughter from the coffee machine echoed off the cold concrete walls. "You lost, sweetheart?" Morrison asked, his voice dripping with condescension. To him, she was just a social worker in a uniform. Sarah met his gaze without flinching. "Officer Sarah Martinez," she replied. "I'm your new partner." Morrison ignored her hand, sipping his coffee. He saw a princess. Sarah saw another obstacle to overcome. Jake Chen, Morrison's partner, had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Don't mind him," he whispered, but Sarah knew that look. She had seen it in Coronado. Captain Rodriguez emerged. "Martinez, Morrison, Chen, my office now." The captain knew her record, top of her class, commendations, but Morrison wasn't interested in paper. "We need boots on the ground for the West Side Initiative," Rodriguez began. Morrison scoffed. "What we need is muscle, Captain, not more PR smiles." The mission was clear. Rebuild community trust in a neighborhood that had none. Morrison saw a soft target. Sarah saw a strategy she'd been born to execute. Respect wasn't given freely in Sarah's world. It was forged in the mud of Coronado. She had stood alongside the toughest warriors on the planet. She was the only woman in the frame, standing shoulder to shoulder with men who became brothers. The training had nearly broken her, but she refused to quit. Hell Week had been 6 days of fire. She had carried boats over her head until her arms went numb and swum through freezing water until hypothermia was a whisper away. When her body screamed to stop, her mind took command. She learned that pain was a temporary guest, but the legacy of quitting lasted forever. Morrison didn't know the woman standing in front of him. He saw a rookie. She saw just another mission to be completed with surgical precision. "We're heading out in 20, Jake had warned. "It gets rough out there." Sarah didn't need the warning. She had already lived through the rough parts. Because Sarah Martinez knew the geometry of survival, Precinct 47 thought they were testing her. They didn't realize she had already passed the hardest test of all.
The West Side looked exactly like Sarah had imagined. A patchwork of struggling businesses, abandoned warehouses, and housing projects that had seen better days. Children played in streets littered with broken glass, while groups of young men posted up on corners, their eyes tracking the patrol car with practiced suspicion. This was gang territory, a place where the police were viewed as enemies rather than protectors. Morrison pulled the car to a stop. Morrison was busy scanning the street, his hand resting near his weapon. "Chen, check the alley. Martinez, stay here and look pretty." Sarah watched Jake head for the alley, then turned her attention to an elderly woman struggling with her bags. Without waiting for permission, she stepped out. "Ma'am, let me help you with those," Sarah said gently. The woman looked up with rheumy eyes, surprised and suspicious in equal measure. "I don't need no help from cops," the woman muttered. Sarah replied softly, "My grandmother would never forgive me if I let a lady carry heavy bags alone." Mrs. Patterson talked the entire way about her grandson trying to stay out of trouble and how the neighborhood had changed. She was scared most days. "You seem different from the others," Mrs. Patterson observed. "What made you want to be a cop?" Sarah simply said, "I wanted to help people." Mrs. Patterson studied her. "Well, you got your work cut out for you here, young lady. These streets eat up people with good intentions." As they descended, Jake spoke quietly. "That was good work. Morrison won't admit it, but we need more of that." When they returned, Morrison was murderous. "Congratulations, Princess. You just wasted valuable patrol time on a photo op." Sarah met his gaze. "We made a connection with a community member who might actually trust us now. That's not a waste." Morrison stepped close. "This job requires hard decisions and harder actions. Until you prove you can handle a real situation, shut the hell up." "I'll prove myself when the opportunity arises," Sarah said calmly. This was a defining moment, one that would set the tone for everything that followed.
Every morning, Sarah Mitchell arrived at the precinct early, met only by Morrison's cold exclusion. Treated like a liability rather than a partner, she found herself eating alone, her presence barely acknowledged. But she'd endured worse. Bud's training had taught her to break everything down into manageable pieces and never quit. She built her own ties on the west side, learning the shadows where the Broken Crowns gang operated. Mrs. Patterson warned her, Reaper was planning something big. The Crowns owned the neighborhood, body and soul. Sarah stayed late, mapping territories and tracking a criminal organization that had outmatched detectives for years. Morrison laughed at her. These people will kill you, he warned, but Sarah met his eyes. Then I better be smarter. Left alone with the files, her mind raced with possibilities. The fight for the west side was just beginning.
The call came at 2:37 a.m. Sarah's training kicked in instantly. "Martinez," she said, answering before the second ring. The community center was chaos, shattered glass and sirens. "Multiple casualties, Martinez." Rodriguez's voice was grim. "It's real bad." Among the shadows, Sarah found Devin. "If you don't talk, they win," she whispered. The boy's resistance crumbled as he spoke of Reaper. "He had a tattoo," Devin whispered. "A broken crown. Reaper." The name meant the gang was consolidating power through fear. The trail led to the old warehouses, a collection of hollow shells, the perfect hideout for the Broken Crowns to strike from. Morrison and Chen moved in. Sarah followed, her movements fluid and precise, the result of years of disciplined tactical training. "Hold position for backup," Morrison ordered. But in that silent instant, everything went wrong.
A dog barked somewhere in the darkness, loud and insistent. Inside the warehouse, the voices stopped. Shadows moved quickly. Sarah recognized the signs immediately, the sound of people preparing to flee or to fight. "They know we're here," Jake whispered. Morrison ordered a fallback. They weren't equipped for a confrontation. But time ran out. A side door burst open and 3 men emerged, weapons drawn. Time seemed to slow down. Sarah saw it all. Morrison frozen for a crucial half-second. Jake reaching for a weapon he knew would be too slow. Her body moved before her mind caught up. She stepped forward, drawing her weapon with fluid precision. "Police! Drop your weapons now!" Her voice cut through the tension like a blade. Everyone froze. It was the voice of someone who understood violence intimately. Someone who wasn't afraid of it. "I said drop them. You've got 3 seconds before this becomes a very different situation." The lead man was calculating the odds. His finger twitched. Sarah saw the decision forming in his eyes. "Don't," she said quietly. "You think you're fast, but I promise you're not fast enough. Drop it and live." 5 eternal seconds later, the guns hit the floor. Sarah kicked them away, her weapon never wavering. "Where the hell did that come from?" Morrison muttered. Sarah didn't answer. She was already scanning. More people were inside. Jake saw runners, but Sarah, she saw a hunter waiting in the rafters. One figure was circling around. "Sniper, 10 o'clock!" Sarah called out, already moving. The shot came from the darkness. The training from Coronado kicked in. Instinct took over. They were pinned. Morrison was gasping on the ground. The shooter had the high ground and a clear field of fire. "I'll draw his fire," she said. Morrison called it suicide. Sarah just met his eyes with SEAL-trained certainty. She broke from cover, moving laterally. The rifle cracked, dirt kicking up exactly where she'd just been. She wasn't just fighting, she was negotiating. She called him out. She used his own fear against him. "What's your name?" she asked. She promised him fairness. She promised him a story that would be heard. The rifle fell. Empty hands appeared. Sarah emerged from cover, her weapon lowered but ready. Backup arrived in a flood of blue and red. Morrison pulled her aside. "Where did you learn to move like that?" "Before the academy, I was in Coronado. I didn't finish, but the training stuck." Morrison had no comeback. Sarah Mitchell was a secret best revealed in the fire. This is the Mitchell Standard.
The morning after the warehouse fire, the air at Precinct 47 had changed. Respect is rarely given in this building, it has to be earned. Detective Sarah Martinez walked through those doors a rookie, but she left the warehouse a leader. Captain Rodriguez didn't waste any time. "Martinez, close the door, the chief is impressed. You have skills most of my officers don't. That Navy training, why hide it? I didn't want to be judged on what I almost accomplished, Captain. I wanted to be judged on what I can do now." "Fair enough. But the broken crowns are escalating. We need a new edge. I want you to lead a joint task force. Morrison and Chen are on your team. Sarah spent hours in the shadows of the file room. She wasn't just looking for criminals, she was looking for the structural rot in an empire. Morrison found her there. He didn't come to test her this time. He came to apologize. He saw his own daughter's lost dreams in her. He realized she didn't need his protection. She needed his respect. And in the 47th, respect is the only currency that matters. The room was packed. Skepticism hung heavy in the air. But Sarah Martinez wasn't there to play the rookie. She was there to change the game. The Crowns survive because they know how we think. Traditional policing won't work. We have to treat them like an insurgent cell. You don't defeat insurgents by arresting foot soldiers. You cut their funding. You disrupt their logistics. You isolate the leadership until they have nowhere to hide. 3 phases: financial disruption, community intelligence, direct action. This is Operation Crown Fall, and it's built to last. Chief Briggs gave the green light with one condition: perfect operational security. If Reaper smells this coming, the city burns. The skepticism faded. In its place was something more dangerous to the Crowns: cautious optimism. The team was ready. Sarah Martinez walked out of that briefing a commander. Now, the real work begins. And in this city, the morning after is just the start of the longest day.
Phase 1 of Operation Crown Fall began quietly, almost invisibly. A war of shadows fought with pens and spreadsheets. Financial analysts and forensic accountants began tracing the money trails of businesses suspected of Crown connections. Detective Vasquez identified cash-intensive businesses that suddenly became profitable. Sarah spent her days walking the beat, gathering intelligence. Mrs. Patterson became an invaluable asset. Her grandson Marcus wanted out, and she begged Sarah for help. "Reaper, he's like a ghost," Marcus told Sarah. "Only the inner circle sees his face. He's planning something big in 3 weeks." 3 weeks wasn't much time. The task force needed to accelerate their timeline without tipping their hand. Illegal operations were shut down. Licensing enforcement squeezed their businesses. To the Crowns, it just looked like bad luck. But the pressure was mounting. Street contacts reported tension, arguments, and suspicion that someone was talking. Then everything changed on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. The radio crackled with an emergency code. Officer down. Sarah arrived to find patrol cars everywhere. In the middle of the street, a young officer lay motionless. It was Jake. Sarah's vision narrowed. She could see the muzzle flashes from a second-story window. Her training took over. "Give me cover fire," she said. She sprinted toward Jake in a zigzag pattern, her focus absolute. She grabbed Jake's vest and began dragging him toward cover, bullets whizzing past her head. She wouldn't leave him behind. That evening, Sarah visited Jake. He told her the shooter was wearing Crown colors. It wasn't random. It was a message. The Crowns were escalating. If they were willing to shoot at cops in broad daylight, the task force was running out of time. Stopping the bad guys required walking into the darkness alone, and she had been training for that walk her entire life.
The task force meeting convened at 6 a.m. The room was heavy with tension. Jake's shooting had shaken everyone. It was no longer just an investigation. It was a war. Chief Briggs was blunt. She needed answers. Sarah Martinez stood her ground, proposing a calculated risk, going undercover. The Crowns were recruiting, and Sarah had a way in. But the room exploded with objections. Deep cover was dangerous, maybe even suicide. Sarah revealed her truth. 5 years ago, her brother was killed in the crossfire of a gang shooting. She joined the force to ensure it never happened again. "I know the stakes," she told them, "and I won't quit no matter how hard it gets." Chief Briggs gave her 72 hours. Angela Reyes was born, a ghost from Phoenix with a criminal record. Sarah practiced until Angela felt more real than herself. The recruitment gathering was held in an abandoned auto shop. 20 desperate souls, and one undercover cop looking for a way in. She met Snake. He was cold, dangerous. "If you screw up, if you talk, we'll find you," he warned. Sarah didn't flinch. She was in. Phase 2 of Operation Crown Fall had officially begun. The hunt for Reaper had finally moved inside the fortress. There was no turning back now. In this world, one mistake is all it takes to disappear.
The shipment job went smoothly. Sarah arrived at the loading dock behind a seafood distribution center, blending into the machinery of a criminal enterprise. She worked alongside 6 other recruits, moving heavy crates. No questions, no complaints. She played the role of a perfect soldier. The crates were likely filled with contraband, but Sarah stayed focused. After 2 hours of labor, the payout arrived. Snake called her back. He liked her discipline. He handed her a bonus, an extra $1,000 and a promise of bigger work. "There's bigger work coming up," he told her. "We need people we can trust for security. You interested?" Sarah didn't hesitate. Over the next week, Sarah worked 3 more jobs. Each one pulled her deeper. She transported packages, stood guard, and watched. Every location, every name, every pattern was reported back through dead drops. The task force was mapping the entire Crown operation. They identified the safe houses and the lieutenants. But Reaper remained a ghost, a name whispered in the shadows of the Crowns. Then Snake called. A big meeting at the warehouse. Reaper wanted to meet the new recruits. Sarah knew this was the moment she'd been waiting for. Morrison wanted to strike, but Sarah argued for patience. "If we raid now, Reaper might escape. Let me get inside, identify him, then we hit them." She wore a wire, with tactical teams positioned minutes away. At the first sign of trouble, they would move in with everything they had. The tension was palpable. 30 Crown members gathered. Everyone knew something significant was about to happen. Sarah took her position. Snake led the recruits to the center. "When Reaper arrives, show respect. No speaking, no staring." Sarah's wire was live, transmitting every breath. 3 figures entered, 2 massive bodyguards flanking a shorter person in a dark hoodie. The figure surveyed the room with absolute authority. When the hood was pushed back, shock rippled through Sarah. Reaper was a woman, cold, intelligent, and until now, completely invisible. "I see we have new faces," she said, her voice echoing. "Good, we need fresh blood." She examined each recruit carefully, searching for weakness. When she reached Sarah, those eyes locked on. Sarah kept her cover steady, her heart racing beneath the wire. Then, Reaper smiled slightly. She outlined the plan, a massacre of the East Side gangs. Sarah was assigned to a warehouse strike, while Reaper would lead the main force. The meeting breaks. As Sarah turns to leave, a massive bodyguard steps into her path. "Reaper wants to see you, alone." Sarah's blood ran cold. Sarah sealed the deal with a handshake. "I'd be honored." As she left, she activated her wire. "I've identified Reaper. We need to move fast." The trap was set. Either Sarah's cover was perfect, or Reaper was playing a much deeper game. Tomorrow night would determine everything.
The task force assembled in the pre-dawn hours. 5 tactical teams, coordinated with surgical precision, gearing up for the largest operation the precinct had ever attempted. Sarah Martinez was leading the charge. Chief Briggs made it clear, "We take them down tonight, or they become untouchable." The weight of the West Side's future rested on Sarah's shoulders. At 9:15, the signal was given. Tactical teams flooded the warehouse. Chaos erupted as the law met the empire built on fear. Reaper was defiant until the end, but Sarah's training was absolute. In one fluid motion, the gang leader was disarmed and the Crown's reign was over. 62 arrests. One night, the organization that had plagued the city for a decade was gone. Sarah had kept her promise. Promotion to detective followed shortly, the fastest in the precinct's history. But the real reward was the silence that finally returned to the streets. In the West Side, families can finally breathe. The princess they tried to silence had become the warrior they now follow. Sarah Martinez found her purpose. The fight for justice continues. But tonight, a victory belongs to the people. Because someone had the courage to stand between the innocent and the dark.